Most people who talk about that match will tell you it came down to Alex Eala's forehand, how she ripped it cross-court with reckless precision, or maybe her stamina, that unsettling way she seemed to breathe easily while her opponent gasped for air. But those people are wrong. The truth sits heavier than a highlight reel. The Roman crowd didn't go quiet because of a winning shot. They went quiet because something broke inside them, not their voices, their understanding. They felt betrayed by the sport they thought they owned. So why would a stadium packed with Italian tennis fanatics, generations of clay court purists who measure life in rallies and suffering, stop cheering for their own? Why would they sit in stunned silence, eyes locked on a teenage girl from the Philippines, as if she had just performed a magic trick that violated the laws of physics? This wasn't a victory. It was a collapse of expectations so complete that even the veterans in the stands forgot to applaud. The first few minutes were exactly what everyone expected: electric, loud, hostile in that beautiful Roman way. But then somewhere in the middle of the second set, something happened that left the so-called experts scrambling for words. Not a big shot, not a net cord lucky break, something subtle, so subtle that the broadcast commentators, trained to catch every twitch and breath, missed it entirely. Yet it changed everything. If you watch the front row faces closely, you can see the exact moment the energy of the Eternal City shifted. The whistles died, the jeers evaporated, and in their place came something far stranger: a low, haunting quiet. Respect maybe, or the sound of a worldview cracking. This wasn't momentum. This wasn't a lucky streak. It was calculated, almost surgical, a kind of psychological chess that the tennis world hasn't witnessed in decades. Forget the fast serve. Forget the deep return. What happened on that red clay was a mental dismantling so complete that a seasoned Italian veteran started moving like a confused amateur in her own backyard. Every person in that stadium had come expecting a masterclass in Italian tennis. Instead, they left wondering if they had just watched the birth of something new, something dangerous, something from the Philippines. What did Alex Eala actually do? What gesture, what technical anomaly, what act of defiance broke every rule taught in Europe's elite academies? To answer that, you first have to understand the pressure cooker she walked into. The Foro Italico isn't just a tennis venue, it's a coliseum. And in Rome, careers don't just fade, they die under the weight of red clay, history, and expectation. Rome is not another stop on the tour. It's where players go to prove they belong or to be exposed as pretenders. This is a WTA 1000 event, which for the uninitiated means it sits just one breath below a Grand Slam. The ranking points are enormous. The prize money rewires lives, and the pressure, it has crushed veterans who own multiple major titles. But for Alex Eala, the stakes were even more suffocating. She wasn't just playing for points or prize checks. She was carrying 110 million Filipinos on her back, a nation that has waited decades for a tennis superstar to call their own. Every match she plays gets beamed across islands and cities, and every time the ball kisses the net tape, a country holds its breath. At 19 years old, most players are still searching for their rhythm, fighting for wild cards, hopping to avoid first-round humiliation. But Alex came from the Rafael Nadal Academy in Spain, which means she was raised on a specific doctrine: suffering, resilience, and an almost religious obsession with clay. She has spent thousands of hours sliding under Spanish suns, learning that the dirt is not an enemy but a partner in struggle. But even that elite training cannot prepare you for the raw hostility of a Roman crowd when you're facing their hometown favorite. Italian fans don't just watch tennis, they perform it. They whistle, they shout, they stomp, they whisper curses in your tossing motion. They use everything: sound, silence, movement, to crawl inside your head. Think about what that demands. Standing in the middle of that suffocating Roman heat, surrounded by thousands who want you to fail, thousands of miles from home, young, the underdog, every mistake you make greeted with a roar of approval from people who see you as an intruder. Most teenagers fold. Their feet get heavy on the slippery clay, their serve turns shaky, their vision tunnels, panic sets in like a fever. But Alex understood something early: if she could survive this test, she could survive anything the tour could throw at her. She was fighting not just a top-tier opponent but a stadium that had already written the script for her defeat. The statistics made it worse. Historically, young Asian players have struggled on Europe's slow, heavy, exhausting clay. It demands a different movement: not sprinting but sliding, recovering, patient as a stalking cat. Hit too hard and the thick clay swallows your pace. Hit too soft and you're devoured. It's physical chess at 100 miles per hour. And Alex's opponent was a veteran who knew every bounce, every shadow, every deceptive roll of that Roman surface. On paper, this was supposed to be a quick, painful lesson for the teenager. But as the match unfolded, the numbers began to twist. Her first serve win percentage climbed. Her unforced errors dropped toward zero. The impossible started to feel inevitable. That feeling, watching someone overcome the impossible, is why we love sports. We've all been the underdog fighting against a crowd of doubters. If you see yourself in this young star's struggle, if you're rooting for her to break through that glass ceiling, then you're part of this journey too. Every person who shares this moment helps build the momentum Alex feels on that court. So stay with me because we're about to dive into the tactical shift that actually broke the spirit of the Roman faithful. By the middle of the second set, the energy had changed. You could feel it even through a screen. The whistles were quieter, the murmurs louder. People were checking their tournament programs, double-checking the name of this girl who refused to miss. But even as she climbed back into the match, no one was ready for the masterstroke she was about to unveil. To understand its genius, you have to look at her feet. Because while everyone watched the yellow ball, the real battle was being won in the red dirt. The red clay of Rome is a liar. It looks soft, almost forgiving, but it's a grinding machine designed to expose every flaw in your technique. Early in the match, Alex seemed to be falling into the trap that has claimed hundreds before her. She was playing too far back, miles behind the baseline, where heavy Italian topspin had all the time in the world to kick up and push her even farther out of position. From that distance, every shot feels like climbing a mountain. You run twice as much as your opponent just to keep the ball in play. In the Roman afternoon, that's a recipe for collapse. The crowd saw it and they were satisfied. They thought they were watching a typical defensive baselaner who would eventually run out of gas. But as the second set progressed, the geometry of the court began to change in ways that defied clay court logic. Why did Alex suddenly decide to step 2 meters inside the baseline during the highest stakes moments? This is where the mystery deepens. On clay, stepping forward steals your own reaction time. You're choosing to meet the ball while it's still high and heavy before it loses energy. It's a high-risk, high-reward strategy that only the top 5 players in the world can execute consistently. But here was a teenager from the Philippines standing her ground against a barrage of shots that should have pushed her to the fence. Every time her opponent hit deep, Alex moved forward. She took the ball on the rise, cut off angles, and forced the veteran to sprint sideways like a frantic shadow. Consider the rally at 3 games all in the second set, a grueling 24-shot exchange that had everyone on their feet. Her opponent was loading the ball with massive spin, the kind of shot that usually forces a defensive lob. But Alex was doing something different. She was flattening her swing just enough to pierce the heavy Roman air while keeping the control to stay inside the lines. How can someone so young have that hand-eye coordination under such extreme tension? The commentators in the booth scrambled for words. They kept watching her feet, waiting for a slip or stumble that never came. Her sliding wasn't just a stop, it was a launch into the next shot. Each example of her brilliance added another layer of confusion to the Italian fans. In a typical match, fatigue breaks technique first. Feet get lazy, shots get shorter, but for Alex the opposite happened. The longer the match went, the more precise her game became. She painted lines with the surgical accuracy of a 15-year veteran. Her opponent began to look across the net not with confidence but with dread. Every winner came back with interest. Every drop shot was read before it left the strings. Have you ever seen a player who seems to be moving in slow motion while everyone else rushes? That was the feeling on center court. The pace of the match was no longer dictated by the Italian veteran. It belonged to the girl from the Philippines. But even as she dominated physically, a new problem emerged. In tennis, when you play too perfectly, you often hit a wall of mental fatigue. You realize how close you are to the finish line, and that's when nerves strike. The pressure built to a breaking point, and the crowd waited for that one moment when the teenager would finally crack. The mystery was no longer just about her technique. It was about her internal hardware. Could a human being maintain this level of focus without a single mental error? The analysts looked at the data, her steady heart rate, her fluid movement, her unblinking eyes, and it didn't make sense. But the real problem was the crowd. They were realizing their favorite was losing. The atmosphere turned toxic. The noise reached levels that could shatter a statue's concentration. As Alex prepared to serve for the set, the entire stadium leaned in, waiting for the inevitable collapse of a young player who knew she was about to beat a giant. The tension was so thick that the air itself felt oxygen-starved. And for the first time in the match, Alex looked like she was finally out of answers. But stop right there. If you think this was just about a teenager having a good day, you've missed the entire point of what makes Alex Eala a generational talent. Everyone assumes she won because she was faster or younger or more determined. That's a surface observation that ignores the psychological heist she was actually pulling off. The real twist, she was never playing the tennis match everyone else was watching. While the crowd tried to break her spirit with whistles and shouts, Alex was using that noise as a trigger. Most players see a hostile stadium as a threat. She saw it as a metronome. She timed her breathing to the rhythm of their boos. She turned their negative energy into her own personal fuel cell. This wasn't just tennis. It was emotional alchemy. The assumptions we make about young players from the Philippines or from any emerging tennis nation are usually rooted in condescension. We expect them to be gritty, hard workers, but we rarely expect them to be the smartest person in the room, and that's exactly where Italy got it wrong. They thought they were dealing with a fighter. They were actually dealing with a grandmaster who had already seen 20 moves ahead. At the most critical juncture of the match, when any other player would have played it safe with a deep ball down the middle, Alex did the unthinkable. She hit a drop shot so delicate, so perfectly disguised, so incredibly risky that it felt like a slap across the face of Italian tennis tradition. It was a move that said, "I am not here to survive you, I am here to outclass you." Before we look at the fallout of that single shot, consider that level of ice in her veins. Is that mental toughness something you're born with, or was it forged in those long, painful hours at the Nadal Academy? This moment of defiance was the pivot. It was when Alex stopped being the girl from the Philippines who was just happy to be at the Foro Italico and became the predator the WTA Tour has been fearing. This action reflected her mentor's philosophy: suffer to succeed. But Alex added her own layer: suffer with a smile and a dagger in your hand. She didn't just win a point, she reconditioned the entire stadium. The fans who had been shouting against her suddenly realized they were witnessing poise that usually takes a lifetime to develop. They weren't looking at a teenager anymore, they were looking at a professional who had mastered the art of the psychological flip. She turned the crowd into a silent witness to its own defeat. That drop shot wasn't just a technical choice, it was a statement of intent. It told her opponent that no matter how hard she fought, no matter how loud the crowd roared, Alex held the keys. It was a masterclass in reinterpreting pressure. Most people think pressure is something that happens to you. Alex proved that pressure is something you create for others. She took the collective expectation of a nation and the collective hostility of a stadium and crushed them both into a single perfect point. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in Rome. It was the sound of 1,000 assumptions shattering at once. But a single moment of brilliance is just a highlight. To understand if this was a fluke or a blueprint, we need the cold, hard evidence the broadcast cameras missed. The numbers don't lie. In that second set, Alex won 78% of her first serve points. The tour average is closer to 60. She wasn't just putting the ball in play. She was dictating where the point would end before her opponent even moved. Compare the heat map of her movement in Rome to her matches just a month earlier. Earlier in the year, she spent most of her time 5 feet behind the baseline. In Rome, tracking data shows she stood practically on the line for over 70% of rallies. That shift gave her a 15% increase in short ball opportunities. She wasn't waiting for the ball, she was taking the fight to it. That's why the Italian veteran looked so exhausted. She was forced to run 20% more distance than Alex in every game. Even top players like Swiatek or Goff rely on defensive skills on clay. But Alex produced offensive numbers that rivaled the best in the world: 22 winners in the second set alone. Her opponent managed 9. The veteran was outplayed in every category that matters. And the tracking technology confirms something even stranger. The speed of Alex's ground strokes increased by an average of 8 miles per hour in the final 3 games. Most players slow down when nervous. They hit shorter balls. Alex did the exact opposite. She accelerated. She played with a freedom that only comes from total confidence in your system. For those who stayed until the end, here's a small detail the television cameras almost missed. After match point, Alex didn't just celebrate with her team. She walked over to the ball boy who had been standing in the sun for 2 hours and handed him her wristband with a smile. A gesture of humility, a reminder of character behind the technique. This victory wasn't an accident. It was the result of a new blueprint Alex has been building in secret at the academy. So what did Alex Eala actually do in Rome that changed everything? She proved that you don't need to come from a traditional tennis powerhouse to own the red clay. She showed that a teenager from the Philippines can walk into the lion's den of the Foro Italico and walk out wearing the crown. It wasn't about points or prize money. It was about the moment the world realized that the gap between the legends and the next generation had finally closed. Alex didn't just win a match, she won the respect of a city that prides itself on never being impressed. This victory stripped away the idea that geography defines destiny. When you look at how she handled the heat, the pressure, the hostility, you realize we're looking at something far bigger than a single victory. This was a message to the rest of the tour: the kid isn't a kid anymore. She's a strategist, a gladiator, a symbol of what happens when you refuse to let your environment dictate your potential. The crowd in Rome arrived expecting to see a local hero dominate. They left talking about the girl with the iron will. As she moves closer to the grand stage of Paris, the question is no longer if she can compete with the best. It's how long until she beats them all. If Alex can do this in the suffocating pressure of Rome, she can do it anywhere. She has shattered the glass ceiling for an entire nation and redefined what it means to be a champion in the modern era. This is a story of a young woman who looked at the impossible and decided it was just another hurdle to slide past. The road ahead is long, and the red clay of the French Open will be even more demanding. But after what we saw in Italy, would you really bet against her? This is more than a sports story. It's a movement that is only just beginning for every fan who has ever felt like an outsider. The real mystery now is how high this ceiling actually goes. Is she destined for the top 10 by the end of the year? Or are we looking at a future world number 1 in the making? If you want to be there the moment she breaks into that elite circle, stay close. We're tracking every serve, every tactical shift as this history unfolds. You don't want to be the one who missed the moment it all clicked into place. Do you think she can win a Grand Slam before she turns 21? The next chapter of this incredible journey is already writing itself.